The Connecticut Music Oral History Podcast is a deep dive interview series with musicians, artists, conduits, collectors, and dedicated fans, focusing on 20th century Connecticut music history. This project preserves narratives, heralds unsung movers and shakers, and defines Connecticut's influential role in cultural history. I'm your host, Brendan Toller. I'm an artist, a musician, a filmmaker, and marketing manager of the incredible Verso Studios at the Westport Library, where this very podcast is being produced. Verso Studios is a media resource and production hub, serving as an inclusive, empowered, future-forward cultural and learning center. A library branch of the 21st century, Verso Studios provides programming, commercial services, as well as educational and content creation opportunities. We have a state-of-the-art hybrid analog recording studio designed in part by Rob Fraboni, the same guy who built Keith Richards' home studio down the road. We record bands, artists, audiobooks, podcasts, and everything in between. We have video production suites, classes, and events. Check us out at the Verso Studios website and on social media. Hello everyone, this episode features Karen Ponzio, arts and culture journalist for the New Haven Independent. Karen has shared her poems, displayed her artwork, and has hosted a variety of live shows at venues throughout the New Haven area over the past 10 years, as well as the CygnusRadio.com show The Word According to KP, which featured both poetry and music. Here's our conversation. What was your first musical memory?
Ooh. Honestly, like Sesame Street and like singing along and dancing along to every single... I watched Sesame Street like 3 times a day when I was a kid. And anything that was on like there that you could do with that, I sang along with. I loved it.
Do you remember the songs?
I actually had the Sesame Street album, so like the ABC song and all of those, Phenomena and all that kind of stuff that probably a lot of people know that are iconic, like the original, because it was the original. I was born in 1967, and I think that's the same year Sesame Street started. So I think I watched it and listened to it from like pretty much birth, and I just
Was there music in the house?
Oh yeah, definitely. My father was a huge music fan, loved Frank Sinatra more than anything. I probably have like about 20-something albums of Frank Sinatra albums that were my father's. I still have. And he always sang along with the radio. He just sang on his own, and it was like Ray Charles and Dean Martin and, like the standards. He was like, like a 40s, 50s kind of guy. And then, watching like all those movies, like all the Frank Sinatra musicals, Gene Kelly, that type of thing. So a lot of that stuff was the music that I grew up with my parents.
And then would have been radio, 45s, records, cassettes. What?
We always had the radio on in the car, that's for sure. They had albums. I don't remember cassettes and 8-tracks as we started to get older. But we always had albums, records, 45s. I still have my little case of 45s from when I was younger. I remember... like I actually found, we used to go to Caldor's. Caldor's department store used to have in the record section, you could go in and they would have like a top 40 list. And I like lived for that, like grabbing one of those lists and like circling the songs that I would like hear on the radio, or the 45s that I wanted and the 45s that I had. And I was like very meticulous about keeping track of things like that. It was very, because then as I got older, got into like, American Bandstand and watching like the Monkees and Soul Train and, anything I could see that had music in it. I think I was talking about this recently to somebody of like, how you didn't see somebody playing live. You would see them on American Bandstand, which usually wasn't live. But, you know, or you would see them on the talk shows, which were like Mike Douglas and Dinah Shore and Merv Griffin. Or you would see people, what was that, Midnight Special? Yeah, Midnight Special. So it was like those types of shows. So if you saw somebody, it would be like the most exciting thing to see somebody like performing a song that you heard on the radio or you had the record of. Even the Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. Oh my God, that was like to stay up for that was like the biggest deal in the world. Like you're staying up to see even the commercials. It was like the Dr. Pepper commercials with I can't think of his name now. Was it David Naughton? Yeah, who also had the record "Making It," which I also have, and I still have. And he did the Dr. Pepper commercials, and that was a big deal because he was singing and dancing in that. So yeah, it was anything. I started young and anything. Sonny and Cher, Cher, Donnie and Marie, anything. I was.
Yeah, who are some formative artists for you?
I would honestly say like Cher. I loved Cher. I wanted to be Cher so bad. Oh my God, I would have done anything to have like her long hair and her outfits and and then thinking about it, and really didn't think about it then, but thinking about it now, like now, of course, you can go online and see clips of all those shows. And the people that she performed with, you know what I mean? Like she performed with Tina Turner and she performed with Michael Jackson, the Jackson 5, she performed with everybody. So again, it was an opportunity to see these people that you wouldn't, you're not going to go to a show and see them. They're not coming around. It's not like now where, you can pretty much go see anybody you want or click and find somebody playing live or a video of somebody playing live, I should say. So yeah, anything like that. But definitely I would say Cher was a big one.
Where'd you grow up?
I was born and raised in East Haven, Connecticut. And so pretty much I really didn't go anywhere but like East Haven, New Haven, and like wherever my relatives lived, which were all like around there. So like Morris Cove and Orange and Milford and North Branford. I was very provincial. Still
was New Haven Coliseum kind of big for you? Who did you see there?
Yeah, my first concert at the New Haven Coliseum was Kiss with their makeup on. So yes, back in 4th grade, which would be like 77, 78.
Who took you to that?
My sister and her boyfriend, who is now her husband. And my brother made a poster for me. That's when if you made the posters and held up the posters and the radio station, I think it was 13 Waves. AM would, if you had the poster, you'd pick your poster and you'd win a prize. And my brother was really good at art and he made a poster for me to hold up. And I'm trying to think of who. I think the band that opened for them was called The Rockets. I think that's who it was. But it was the whole thing with the blood and the fire. And oh my God, that was the start. And I did not go to as many concerts as I wanted to go to there, but I saw a healthy amount of who was popular then. So I got to see like Andy Gibb. I got to see Sean Cassidy. I got to see the Bee Gees in the Spirits Having Flown tour, which was amazing. No matter what anyone says, it was amazing. I saw, Joan Jett there, Hall & Oates. I saw Aldo Nova, Joan Jett, and Hall & Oates. That was the lineup for one of the shows there. Crazy.
You caught some good ones.
Yeah.
Did you ever try to sing or play anything? Did you ever try and be a musician?
Yes, and it did not work out well. I think because I was afraid of everything. So I think I got an acoustic guitar for a birthday. I want to say it was either right before middle school or middle school age. And I would try to do something with it, and they would laugh, or somebody would laugh, and I would just say, I can't do that. And I didn't. I wasn't one of those kids who was persistent with like, get me lessons, help me with this kind of thing. I sang like in school and like on my own. Like I was one of those kids who sat there near the radio with her fingers on the cassette waiting for the song to start and stop to make like mixtape recording things and sang along and was like memorized the lyrics on albums and what was it, Hit Parade magazine that had the lyrics. But I didn't have the confidence or the strength, I guess maybe the strength, I don't know, to be like, I want to do this. It was just like a thing I did. And I'm not going to be one of those people who like blames my parents or blames anybody for like not encouraging me or anything like that, because I think that's not really, that's that kind of endeavor doesn't interest me. But yeah, it was like my dream in my head, I was like in my bedroom, I was like a superstar. You know what I mean? I could sing, I could dance, I could do all of these things, but I was like afraid to do that in front of anybody.
You've done a little bit of that since, though.
Oh yeah. I don't play any instruments, but yeah, I don't play any instruments per se, but oh yeah, I've had opportunities to sing, and I've definitely had time in front of the microphone. That has changed a lot. Once I got up there as a almost 50-year-old and started reading poetry and doing things like that, I couldn't stop. It became like became a very important part of my life. So yeah, that changed. That really would. I did a 180, I guess, from childhood to adulthood, later adulthood, not right away.
Well, and to get conceptual for a second, I mean, one of the big reasons I wanted to interview you is because I think it's important for people to hear the trajectory of somebody who's clearly into music but might not be a player. So talk about that, I guess, kind of philosophically, right? Like a scene takes many things. It takes not just musicians, it takes fans, it takes writers, it takes photographers, video people. It takes a whole scene. That's why they call it that.
Yeah, so I mean, the way I got into the New Haven music scene was just by being a fan, by being somebody who showed up at shows. So I started going down. So I used to go to New Haven when I was like in high school and college and everything like that. And then I just stopped going, and my life wasn't doing that. My husband did not like going to clubs, and he didn't like loud music. He didn't drink. He didn't really want to do that. And, and I started, I'm a physical therapist. That's what I went to school for, to college for, Quinnipiac. And I was doing that and doing my thing. And I just, I had my kids, and I still went to concerts, and I still listened to music and paid attention to music, but it wasn't, I wasn't in the scene by any stretch of the imagination. When my kids got older, and exactly what happened is we started going out to dinner in New Haven, and I started doing a little more out in New Haven, and I saw a flyer up for a show at this place called Old School Saloon Bistro, and it was bands and burlesque. And I went to that, and we had been there for dinner before. And I said to my husband, I'm like, let's go to this. And he's like, oh, okay. And I went. And the band there, one of the bands there was the North Shore Troubadours, and they were passing around flyers saying that they were having an album release party at Cafe 9 a week or two later. And I'd never been to Cafe 9. And I said to my husband, oh my God, I want to go there so bad. Would you go? And he was like, yeah, they're great. This band's great. Let's go. And we showed up there, and they were all excited to see us, that we followed, them there. Tim Goslin, who's one of my great friends now. That was his band. And we're there at Cafe 9, and I was so excited to be there. And when we left, my husband's like, oh, yeah, that's not for me. And I'm like, oh my God, I loved it. And then I'm like, and I could see all the things I had coming up. It was kind of when I think I'd just gotten on Facebook or something like that. So then I followed them, and I'm seeing all these things, and I'm like, oh, I want to go to this. I want to go to this. I want to go to that. And, I'm like, do you care if I go alone? And he's like, no, go alone. I just don't. It's too loud. I don't. He works or gets up early. He doesn't want to stay out late that often. And that's what started it. And I started going there, and I got to be friends with Sarah Scranton, who worked there, and she was doing burlesque shows, and we went to them, and then she asked me to stage kitten for them, and I did that, and then I started going to Get to the Point, which was a like kind of an open mic type of storytelling thing, and I started getting back into writing and poetry from grad school, and I'm like, okay, maybe I can do this. And then I got up on stage, and then it just kept going. And so I just started going to participating, but then just also going to shows. And I was taking pictures and taking video and doing live Facebooks. And I was just having so much fun. I always, I always call it second puberty, because I feel like I did all these things that I did not do at the time when most people do them. Yeah, so I just was going, and I just started meeting people, and I just started talking to people, and I just started going to other places like the outer space, and it just all different places, but mostly I was at Cafe 9. And then I started going to open mics and performing regularly. There was a show called Words and Music that Margaret Milano started there at Cafe 9, and I was performing at that, and I ended up hosting it, and then people were asking me to host some different things, and I just, I would go to another show and meet more people. It just, I would be there on a Sunday, and these people would be there like, oh my God, you're so great. Oh, who are you? Some people, I got to the point where people were like, do I know you from The Daily? Do I know you from this? And I'm like, no, I just started like, no, you don't know me from 10 years ago. I'm new. And then, I had a lot of friends, and I made a lot of friends and saw a lot of bands and was having just the time of my life. And, I quit my physical therapy job. I'd been at the same place for 25 years, and I just had kind of had it. And the funny thing is, I like to remember this story too. So Frank Critelli, who we all know and love in the scene.
Former guest on this very podcast.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to see him perform at Neverending Books. And I told my friend Craig Gilbert, also important in the music scene in New Haven. I'm like, oh, I'm going to see Frank Critelli tonight. He's like, oh, you're gonna love him. You're gonna love Frank, old friend of mine. You're gonna love him. And then when the next day or something, he's like, what'd you think of Frank? And I said, I want to quit my job and follow Frank Critelli around and learn about life. And the weirdest thing that happened is that like a year later, I quit my job, and then I ended up, reporting for the Indie and following musicians around. And then I, got the radio. Frank asked me to do the radio show at cygnusradio.com. So it like weirdly came true. That like thing that I kind of said jokingly.
You manifested it.
I guess I did, but yeah. So, that was the thing. Somebody would see me do something and say like, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, yeah, I pretty much said yes to almost everything. So Brian Slattery asked me if I ever thought about writing for The Independent. And I was like, no. And he was like, well, would you want to? And I'm like, could I? And he's like, of course you can. You're doing like 50% of the job already. And this is, and talk about manifesting. So sitting in my, in my bedroom as a teenager and reading all these magazines and reading when I was on the panel at Verso Fest and talking about, I just read those liner notes and read those lyrics, like just memorized them. And the thought of read every Rolling Stone I could get my hand on, when the New Haven Advocate, which is hysterical too, because now those are the people that I'm friends with and who I work for, and the thought that when people say like your dream job, I'm doing my dream job. I got offered my dream job and I said yes to it because at this point, let's see. So 2016 is when I left my PT job, and the end of that year is when Brian asked me to write for the Indie. I was 49 years old. And I'm like, no one is going to, how many, no one's going to ask a 50-year-old woman with no experience to write about music and, pay them money to do it. Like, no one's going to do that. But somebody did, so I had to say yes. Like, this is my dream. This is gonna. And if I was bad at it, they probably would have. I would think they would have told me. So I must have been good at it because they kept me doing it. And I still do it, and I do it, with enthusiasm and love, and yeah, that's my that's my story.
Backing up a bit, describe the New Haven music scene to somebody who has no clue.
Ooh, let me think about that one for a second. I don't have a lot to compare it to because, again, I'm provincial. Like, I don't travel around a lot. But what I would say about the New Haven scene is that you're going to find pretty much any type of music you like there, and you're going to hear people playing it and saying, like, these are like people from around here. This isn't like that reaction I've gotten from people like playing a CD for somebody and saying like that's a band, like that's not like just like that's not like or they'll say something like I'm putting air quotes up here, guys, a real band, and I'll be like, they're a real band from New Haven. That's you could hear that music on the radio. Like, you're going to find such a mixture. It's such a great mixture of sounds and personalities, people who are so committed to what they do, people who have been doing it for 50 years, and people who have been doing it for 5 years. And there's just this dedication to the music, and that has always impressed me. Again, I don't have anything to compare it to except popular music, which, again, even that, I don't have experience in the scene of popular music. But listening to, what's on the radio or, Spotify or YouTube or whatever. But I think that I would tell people, like, this, you're going to find something you like. You're probably going to find something you love, and you're going to be surprised by it. You're going to say, like, this could be on the radio, or this could be in a movie. The caliber of it, and fun. I think it's really fun. Like, I don't think I would have stayed with it if it wasn't fun. And I think that could be surprising to people as well. But you have got to show up. you got to come down there and listen to it, or stop by one of these places and check it out. But yeah, I think everybody I know who's ever has checked something out, who hadn't before, is always pleasantly surprised.
I'll ask you about your favorite writers, but first I want to ask about, do you have any writers that you look to in terms of kind of craft? In terms of what you do.
For my music writing, my music culture writing. I grew... I grew up on, even though I was an adult when I was reading it, but really reading the New Haven Advocate, and again, that was Paul Bass, that was Craig Gilbert, who's one of my best friends, Colleen Von Tassel. There's Carol, Chris Arnott. These are writers, and then Todd Lyon, who her writing, and Fran Fried. So these again are people that I read. I say growing up, but I'm going to say I was an adult. I was in my 20s and stuff when I wasn't like a little kid when I read them. But that writing really got me excited because I always felt like it also was fun. Like I couldn't wait to see Fran's next piece in the Register. I couldn't wait to see Todd's next restaurant review. I couldn't wait to see, what show Craig had seen and Chris Arnott had seen. And now these are all the people that I either work with or I'm friends with. And their writing still is important to me. That writing is I think, maybe I'm biased, but the local writing, Brian's the one who guided me through this. I did not do anything like this before. So he was like, this is what you do. I know you have the chops to do this. I read your writing, but this is what you do. So I followed the format and I did it. But he allowed me to put my voice into it. And I think that's why those writers are the ones that I think about when I started doing the writing, that I still think about when I write, because I feel like their voices are very clear and their love for it and their humor is very clear to me. And that's something that's what I want in my head, as opposed to somebody who's like, like necessarily like a Pulitzer Prize winner or something like that. And I'm not saying those people aren't important, but I feel like I was more raised on the music writing of local music writers than necessarily national ones.
Hmm. And now I'll ask you what your favorite writers are: poetry, fiction, nonfiction, otherwise, whoever comes to mind.
Yeah, so I'm a big poetry person. I'm a poet, and which and so Walt Whitman has inspired me from, I'm old school with that stuff. Like Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman are the ones who captured me. Walt Whitman more for the epic ongoing. I always feel like Frank Critelli is our Walt Whitman in the scene. I really do. And Emily Dickinson for like those brief glimpses of beauty. So each one of them has something that they do, and, looking at the world and such unique ways to look at the world, which is what I love about any writer that I love. It's usually because they it isn't so much, I think, technique as much as it's, again, their voice and how they capture their vision of the world and how they make me look at the world. So somebody like Mary Oliver, as I got older, Mary Oliver, who a lot of people are like, oh, Mary Oliver, she's on cards and notebooks and all this stuff. And it's like, no, Mary Oliver is like, how anyone can look at anything out in nature and anything in the world, again, the same after reading something Mary Oliver wrote about it is just, I don't understand that. Like, she just has a way of capturing nature and the world. And then I'm a huge James Joyce fan, like huge James Joyce. And fortunately, in this part of my career with doing this, I've been able to participate in a Finnegan's Wake project. I was able to do a song spoken piece that's in a Finnegan's Wake project that was people from all over the world did, which was like just one of the great joys of my life to be able to be involved in something like that. I've done like a Ulysses show with other people in the New Haven scene at Best Video. We did a Finnegan's Wake. The four of us that were involved in the project from the scene did a show like last year for like the 50th anniversary of it at Volume 2, Never Ending Books there. And anything like Finnegan's Wake, Ulysses, Joyce to me is just like the beginning and the end with that stuff, like experimental and, these epic pieces of literature that just you can go back to and discover something new every single time you read them. So, big influence, big part of like my heart and my head is James Joyce.
At its best, what do you think arts reporting does?
At its best, it gets people excited about about the arts, about that particular thing you're writing about. So I've said this before, so it's not like I'm leaking like a secret here, but Brian, when I started doing the job, Brian said to me, you have like one job, just like, make people want to come to New Haven. And I think I've done that. I'm not saying I've done that alone, but I know for a fact that there's people who are like, oh my God, I wish I was at that show. When I read your article, I wish I was at that show. Or, oh, I read, I never heard of that band before. And then like I watched the video and like, wow, they're really good. And I'm like, yeah, they are. Yeah. definitely wouldn't be writing about them if they weren't. And we tend to not be. So there's that thing about like arts journalism, arts criticism. Now that I've been in it for a while, I've taught a journalism class that was, obviously focused on arts journalism because that's what I do. So there is the act of reporting what happened, which I think is more straightforward journalism, but you can do that in the arts as well. So, for example, I reported on a Big Fat Combo show at Best Video the other night, and some things happened there. It was a fantastic story, and really, I was telling people what happened.
What happened?
The microphone stopped working 4 songs in, so they were playing their instruments, but they could not. No one could hear the vocals, and it ended up being where Tom Hearn led a sing along, and he got other people in the audience because they have such great friends and talented friends because we have such a great music community. They got 3 of them got up and sang. And then another great person in the music community, Dean Falcone, went home and got his PA and hooked it up, and then they were able to continue the show. And so it's a fantastic story, but it's a fantastic story the way it happened. And that's not me knocking myself as a writer. That's me saying that part of that is being there on the scene and being able to take the video pictures and write down and report what happened.
You mentioned sort of the tradition of arts criticism. I would think that there's a conscious decision with the indie staff. You guys don't really, I don't think you are critical or negative. And I kind of think, you know what? New Haven's such a small scene. We don't need that kind of stuff. We need coverage.
Yeah, so this is something that I've dealt with from the beginning. Now, remember, I'm somebody who's just out there all the time going to shows and doing my poetry and my thing, and now all of a sudden I'm out there writing about it. So a lot of people were like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm writing for the indie. And they're like, why are you writing for the indie? And I'm like, so there were people who actually said that to me, like, why are you writing for the indie? There were a couple of guys who said to me, oh, you're writing for the indie? Pff, I could do that. I should go call them and see if I could do that. And it was like, oh, okay. Anyway, so there was, 90% of the time, people are lovely to me. Were lovely to me in the beginning. Every so often, I got that kind of like, you're writing for the indie kind of thing. The only reason I bring that up is because it almost always would be followed with, oh, you should like really just rip a band apart. And I would get that. I don't get it now, but I would get that a lot in the beginning. You guys just need to like really just like go and be like really just rip them. And I was like, and so, I talked to Brian about it, and I'm like, have you ever, and he's like, what's the point of that? Like, what's the point of, okay, so we're not PR, we're not public relations. So there's that misunderstanding too, where some people think that the whole point of, come to the show, we need people to like buy our album kind of thing. Very rarely I get that. Like, we want, are you going to come? You guys should be coming to this because people need to hear this. And I always take that as just, like some people, it's just their enthusiasm for like, they want people to hear their record. They want people to come to their show. But we don't, there's the two ends of it. We don't do PR. We're not just out there to write, like, hey, this is great. I think there's the journalism part of it where we're reporting on what's going on in the scene and keeping a record of it. And I think that's important. The kind of like what you're doing here. You're getting, stories from people of what happened, how they got into it, where they're going, so it's a record of, it's a part of history. So I think that's at its, core. I think that's what arts journalism is keeping a record of what happened, like other forms of journalism, but just in the arts. The critical part of it, I think that you can be critical. Brian's very good about that with like a lot of the theater writing, which I don't do. I tend to do music, events, writing movies. I don't do visual arts or theater. He tends to do that. And he has had some where he's critical, but he's not mean. And I think I know when I taught my class, I taught at a ECA, Educational Center for the Arts, and on New Haven, and Arts High School. And I really tried to get across to the kids that, critical always doesn't mean bad. You can talk about the fine points of a song, of an album, of a performer, of a performance, and it doesn't have to be negative or mean. You're describing it. You're diving into it, and then there's that, well, if you don't play music, how can you write about music? Well, I'm a poet. I can write about anything. You know what I mean? I don't have to know about something. It's my interpretation of it. So similar to, Mary Oliver didn't have to be a botanist to write about the trees and the plants that she saw. She wrote beautifully about them. And I think that a person can write beautifully about music and visual arts and performers without being a performer.
Totally. And that example exists so many places. Along those lines, I mean, things are opening up a bit now with certain zines and maybe some certain republications, but were you surprised that, it just seemed like, New Haven Independent was the only arts coverage for a while in that region?
Well, there's also the arts paper.
Yes, of course.
That does a lot, and they are, but that's all they do. You know what I mean? So as opposed to the Independent, so arts coverage is a part of the Independent, and then you have the arts paper, which is all that. You have the Daily Nutmeg, who again is everything. And I think there's always been people who there's always been blogs. There's always been, with Instagram, a lot of people started going on Instagram and doing some different things. So I think it's always been there, and it kind of, in my time around, it's been there and it ebbs and flows. I think what's happened though, since COVID, is that just a lot of people are doing things that they always wanted to do. And there's a lot of people have always wanted to write or write about the arts, or just write in general, and or make books, or make so zines are great for that. So now you have these zines come out. So you have these people come out with these music zines, or a New Haven based. There's been a couple that I've written about. They just want, they're excited about the scene, and they want more people to get excited about it too. So I think it's this collective, a lot of the people I interviewed during COVID. So we did a lot of interviews during COVID that were, done over Zoom or FaceTime, or, because obviously nobody, things were locked down, and we still wanted to, and people were making records, or finding music they hadn't worked on in a long time, and saying, hey, I'm locked up in my house. Let me pull out these recordings and see what I could do with them. And the thing that I heard over and over again was I always wanted to do this, but I didn't have the time. And I think one of the, I'm not saying, oh, I'm glad COVID happened, but I think one of the good things that happened during COVID is a lot of people put time into things they didn't have time for before. And I think the other thing is that it made a lot of people say, you know what, I always wanted to do this thing, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to make time to do it. So as we crawled out of lockdown and things started opening and people started deciding what they did and didn't want to put their time into, that's one of the things that happened. And I think it's great. You know what I mean? I don't look at it like any type of I look at it as actually a more the merrier thing. There's a thing now with the Independent called the Independent Review Crew, and they have people reporting from not just other towns in Connecticut, but other cities all over the country. And it's great to hear about what's going on in Tulsa and in Boston and in Hartford. You know, it's great. I love it. I love that, you know, because everywhere is a music community, you know. Tulsa has to have a music community, you know. What are they doing? You know, and there's always stuff you're gonna miss. There's so much going on. I mean, we just started looking at what we're going to be doing for September. There's no way anybody can cover it all. It's impossible. However, there's more people looking at it and going to it, you know, then there's more people to spread the word, and maybe more people will come to it, and it just that nice little life cycle there.
Could you give us a KP crash course? You know, what has to be done when you're covering a show?
Well, I prep. There's always prep. So if it's a band that I know, there's less prep. If it's a band I don't know, or if it's something going on that I'm not familiar with, people involved, I research that. And then at the show, you know, you gotta get your equipment ready, of course. Make sure your batteries are charged and you got your pens. Always make sure. I have 3 pens all the time. Not 2, 3. Remember that. If you ever do any reporting, bring 3 pens. You'll thank me for that later on in life, in your career. But yeah, then you go and you pay attention. It sounds like I'm being really flip, but you pay attention to. It's not just about the show; it's about the place, and it's about the people. So you pay attention to everything that's going on. If it's something where you have to talk to somebody, you find that person and you make sure you talk to them. You can talk to them at a time that's good for them. So sometimes it's not really good to talk to somebody before they go on stage, right before they go on stage, or right after they come off the stage. That tends to be one of the worst times, but for some people. So you try to see if you can talk to them, be like, hey, when can we talk, if you need to do that. But otherwise, it's mostly like if it's just covering like a band's, it's mostly just, laying back and paying attention and listening and watching and taking like hundreds of pictures and yeah, that's what you do. And if it's something that's more involved, where you're it's more of an event where you have to talk to people, you find out when it's okay. Is it okay to talk to you now, or you look busy? Can I catch you in maybe 15 minutes or something? And you do that, and you and you're still paying attention, but you need a little more of a guidelines plotting to when you can talk to this one and that one and everything, because I don't like being too intrusive. That's me. I don't like to be the person who's asking a lot at inopportune moments. I know enough about performers to know that, not everybody feels great. Not everybody has the exact same time when they feel good about talking to you or being around people. So, and I know that too, as somebody who's performed. It's sometimes, beforehand, not good, and sometimes after it's not good. But yeah, it's the core of it is paying attention.
Any favorite pieces come to mind?
I really like the one I just did. I know maybe that's the easy way out, but that Big Fat Combo one I was so happy that I was there. So happy that I was there. I mean, that's a show I may have gone to anyway if I wasn't working, because they're just great. They're just great. And I had major surgery last year in the summer, and I missed a lot. I did not go to shows for 3 months or something like that. Because I was trying to not get COVID before the surgery, and then afterwards just because I couldn't. And I couldn't wait to get back. I really couldn't wait to get back. But there's some shows that you really even if you're not reporting on them, I like to go to because they're fun. But that one was that one was great. I really was super happy to write about when Never Ending Books was closing, which ended up not closing. And I know that like part of what happened there and how things got going was people finding out about what was happening and then kind of rallying. So, and in no way am I saying like, oh, I was the reason why that happened. I'm not, but I really loved how that article, like so many people just loved that place and were like shared their, memories and were like so like rooting for that place. And then, it ended up being that so many people were rooting for that place that some of those people who were rooting for it took it over, and now it's still there and it's volume 2 and it's like thriving and amazing. And every time I go there, I'm just like so happy that it's there and exists. So I was really happy. I really felt good about doing that because Roger, that was an important place for me to be. That was a really important place for me to grow and into who I am, attending shows at that place. That's another real, like Cafe 9, it's a real hub of community in New Haven. It's just so much happens there. So many different things happen there. Yeah, those two stand out. There's so many. It's really. I also was really. I also really loved the anniversary of the local band show at Cafe 9. I got to talk to Rick Allison and Frank Critelli, and the tribute to James Velvet, who's no longer with us, and all the bands that played there. There were so many people there that day. And that's another one that I'm really glad that I was there and got to record that for history. There's a concrete record of that event and video of it and pictures and talking to people, and I think that's important because that's an important show in the local music community.
I would be remiss to not open up the discussion to say that unfortunately, music and media still dominated by men, and for you to talk about that. Sometimes I ask people, what's it like to be a woman, but now it's I think it's what is it like to be non-male, because we're trying to open things up, we're trying to make it an equal playing field. Again, I don't, I have no experience in any other part of the music business or arts world except this one that I've been in. And I've already mentioned that when I first started, there were a lot of people that are like, you're writing about music. And, and it was enough, it was enough that it makes me laugh now. It made me laugh then. I think that it's, I don't want to look in terms of better or worse or good or bad. I think that for me personally, I think that I want to always be contributing and to look at it in terms of like, oh, you're a woman contributing. Like, okay, I am, but also like, are you, if you're judging me from that, I get kind of weird with that sometimes when people start diving into that, because it always seems to be for some reason that doesn't really matter in the course of it. I know that to decide that, like, oh, I can do this, and that, oh, you're doing this or you do this well, and they don't say for a woman, but it's implied kind of thing. I don't get that. I don't get that like I used to, and I don't know if that's because I've been doing it for the amount of time I have. I can't speak for what other people think and what other people, how other people feel. I know that for me, when I have people say to me like, I'm so glad to see a woman writing, or I'm so glad to see a woman on this panel, or I'm so glad to hear a woman's voice in this
area, I'm happy that I can do that. I'm going to do, listen, I'm, I'm in my mid 50s. I grew up like Italian Catholic, like women were, not treated well in the old days for me either. It wasn't like I was kind of, raised in a I was raised in a very loving family, but the mindset back then was you didn't speak unless you were spoken to, kind of thing. And I needed to chill out and, calm down and women are, emotional, don't get emotional, don't cry, don't this, don't that. What I love about this job is that my enthusiasm and my passion about music and about the art scene and the music scene is seen as a plus, as opposed to like chill out. There's that thing, like women are emotional. I had somebody say to me, probably more recently than wasn't like when I was first out. They said something to me like, "Do you just love everything you do? You just seem like you just love everything you do." And they said it like almost like in a negative way. And I'm like, well, yeah, kind of. I'm like, and why is that a bad thing? They're like, oh, no, I didn't mean it. I just never. I'm like, you never saw anybody enjoy what they do? How sad. Like, is that, and I was waiting for I was kind of waiting for that, you're so emotional thing to come out, and it didn't. Again, I felt like it was being a little bit implied, but I will tell you, if nothing else, this job has given me like a confidence and strength that I definitely didn't have when I was younger. I absolutely love what I do. And I know that I would not be, they would have not had me continue doing it if I wasn't good at it, if I wasn't doing it well. So I have that confidence behind me from, some of the, again, these are some of the writers that I love, like again, Paul Bass and Brian, are the ones that, led me through this in the beginning, and that, and Brian still leads me through it as my editor. I couldn't have a better editor. And it's just, to be able to be rewarded for doing what you love and to get excited. And I couldn't wait to tell him. I was texting him about the show the other night. I go back to this Big Fat Combo show. I was texting him like, oh my God, I'm like, wait till you read this. I can't wait to write this piece. I cannot wait to write this piece. I can't wait for you to read this piece. And then he read it and he's like, oh my God, this piece. He's like, this is incredible. This is like one of my favorite things you've ever written. I'm like, I know, me too. And like, who talks like that? Like, I'm thinking like, do other people talk like that? Maybe they do, but that's, it's not about, it's not like, chill out, be more professional or anything like that. It's like, no, my passion and my emotion and the thing that like a lot of, times women are criticized and, dampened or are asked to dampen. It's the opposite in this job. And that's been really good for me as a writer and as a person, I think.
Your radio show on Cygnus?
Yeah, I haven't done that now. And it's probably, I don't think I've done it since the beginning of last year. The medical stuff I was going through was kind of started it, and then I just kind of didn't get back to it. It's something else I did that I really, Frank Critelli said he's like, I always wanted a show. Would you ever want to do like a poetry show, radio show? I've always wanted somebody to do something like that. And again, I said yes, because I didn't think anyone ever asked me to do that. And a radio again sounded like, another like dream come true. And it was great. I was reading my own poetry. Every so often I'd have somebody, Frank's poetry and other musicians that also do poetry, like Brian Robinson, on there and read some, some other famous poets' pieces and stuff, and then try to make it like a theme. It was a lot of fun. And I didn't only play local music. It wasn't like a local band show. I, of course, played local music because I have, I had such a wealth of it around me, and people would give me their, CDs and, send me their files and things like that.
And it's good.
Well, that's another thing. I would sometimes play that and I have people be like, who was that? And I would always post on social media after, this is my playlist. These are the people. And they'd be like, oh, that's not somebody famous. And they'd be like, well, they're famous around here. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, this is really, again, it's the caliber of music we have and performers are just, again, top notch. Again, I'm preaching to the choir with you in particular, but yeah, I did have a lot of fun doing it. I don't know if I'm going to go back to it. But it was a super important part of all of this, of all of the whole, this whole part of my life. That's for sure. And you can't get better people that are there. And Rick Allison is just amazing and would have me on his show every Friday and, on his show every Friday before my show. And Frank Critelli kind of asking me to, him asking me to do it and always supporting me. Really, everybody on there is great, but in particular, Rick and Frank are really just would help me along, give me praise, encourage me, and then after I'd be like, oh my God, Rick Allison, he's a legend.
There a lot of this story I didn't know, but this guy keep having this, it's like you fell down the rabbit hole, and I feel like your life was kind of changed by this Tim Goslin band.
Oh, listen, and you want to hear something else? So we'll bring Tim in. I love Tim. I'll bring Tim into it again. So I'm at Bar in New Haven. Used to have these free Wednesday night shows. And the band No Line North was opening for Jesse Malin. And I went to see them. And Tim happened to be playing with them that night. Brian Slattery was too, my editor. So now I'm in there with No Line North, and we're just hanging and talking. And the next day is when Brian was like, hey... After talking to me so much, that was the most I ever talked to him in person. That's when he asked me to do the job. Now gets better. So he's like, well, look around, see if there's anything you want to go to. So I'm like, well, I'm going to this another one of these Wednesday shows at Bar when Tim Goslin's new band is playing. And so he's like, well, that's the first one you can write about. So they were opening for a band from New York. And yes, I walk in and I'm like, Tim, I said, he goes, don't tell we're not going to tell anybody you're doing it yet. It's going to, when we publish the article, it'll be a surprise. I'm like, I won't. So I told a couple of close friends, but I'm like, Tim, guess what? And he's like, what? I said, I have good news and bad news. And he's like, what? And I said, I'm going to be writing for the, about, music and arts for the Independent. And he's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Congratulations. You're going to be great. I go, the bad news is tonight's my first story. I'm writing about you. And he's like, oh no. And laughing. So yeah. So Tim was there when Brian and I had made more of a connection, and he offered me the job. And then Tim was the first his other band was the first thing I wrote about. So he's my little.
But could you angel. Or would you want to imagine a life without, your involvement in?
No, never. This is, so having the surgery, between COVID and then having major surgery last year, again, I'm one of those people who sat around and was like, what do I want to do? What do I not want to do? How do I want to live my life? You come to some, a lot of people had their little, come to Jesus moment. And, yeah. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, at all, but I think it's important that if you have the ability to do something that you love, to do it, And listen, I've talked to a lot of people who are like, that's a privilege. And I'm like, I never said it wasn't, I never said it wasn't a privilege, but I want to embrace that, I was given a gift. And again, I say it, I know for a fact that Paul and Brian wouldn't have kept me on if I wasn't doing a good job. They're very high caliber writers. They're not going to keep me there if I wasn't doing it. So I know that what I'm doing, I know myself reading my own articles. I know that what I'm doing well. And I can always improve. Writing is like that. Writing is, anything creative, you can always do better. So I challenge myself with different articles, different things. But oh my God, like I want to spend the rest of my life here doing things that I absolutely love. I don't want to do anything that I feel like somebody is forcing me to do if I don't have to. Again, is it a privilege? Yes, and I embrace that, and I hope that I hope that what I do, that people love it, and that they that it makes them want to listen to more music, that it makes them want to go to shows, that it makes them want to have fun. Like, I think how can you, I can't imagine having that in my life again. I had a wonderful life before I did this. I have my two kids are fantastic. They support me in everything. I have a wonderful husband. He supports me in everything. They're like my biggest fans. They cheer me on and support me in everything. But if I can keep doing, and I don't know, am I always going to write for the independent? I don't know. I don't care. Right now, I love what I do, and I want to do it, and I want to stay doing it, and I want to keep doing it well. I still pour over my, the other night that article came out of me like it flowed out like silk. It was such a beautiful story. And I had everything there. I'm like, oh my God, I got the videos I wanted. This is so great. And I still poured over it because I want it to be just right. And that's before it sees 2 other editors. That's how much I love it. I want it to I will never take for granted the gift I was given, because I think of that, I think of that 13-year-old girl on that little bed in East Haven with her, blank cassettes and her marker and her piece of paper. I still have the stuff. I could show it to you. I have cassettes and papers with lists, and the little O dot on my eye. It's like crazy it's crazy that girl is doing this now. If anyone ever told me then, Karen, guess what you're going to be doing when you're like 50? I would have told them, never. Nope. Liar, liar, liar. So yeah, if the worst thing anybody says about me is, oh my God, she's like so happy all the time, she's enjoying everything. Oh well. And you come enjoy it with me. It's all I'm going to say is, come, you do it too. Let's do it. Come on, come down. I'll meet you there. Yeah, that's what. God, it's just, did we not learn? Life is so short. Just have a good time and do things that make you smile and that fill your heart. Oh, it's so wonderful.